If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
My last 2 years of my career, I was taking so many benzos and opiates before games that I was playing games in complete blackouts. I would be home at night, late at night after playing somewhere in the country, an entire game at starting center. And, I didn't remember any of it.
Don't Hide the Scars, a weekly podcast focused on addiction and recovery. Created by the nonprofit Pain, Parents and Addicts in Need, and founded by Flindt Andersen.
Welcoming to Don't Hide the Scars, former NFL center, also the founder of Pro Athletes in Recovery. Of course, great book that just came out in February of this year, Off Center, Randy Grimes. Thank you for joining Flindt Andersen and myself on Don't Hide the Scars.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This is a great opportunity.
One of the real things that that of course, we were talking before we recorded, both Flindt and yourself, opioid addicts. For me, the interesting thing in reading your book, thank you again for the advanced copy, that you had a really good childhood and really telling your story. I don't see a big T trauma or a little T trauma. And this is my speculation, being around addiction more and more now, and more as I get in line, it seems to me opioids are one of the rare substances that are catching people that maybe there isn't a family lineage and history. Yeah. So I just kind of wanted your perspective from your standpoint.
Well, and like you said, I didn't have any trauma, and they say that all addiction is based in trauma. And in my case, that wasn't true. I think I was a product of my environment. I was the guy willing to do whatever I had to stay out on the field. Now, having said that, I remember the first time I ever took opioids, and that was, I had that feeling of, hey, this is what I'm missing. Mm-hmm. This is just what I need to get to the next level and help me through the different injuries that I had and everything else. But, it was also about that feeling that opioids gave you too. But no, there was no predisposition in my family. There was no indication at all of what lied ahead for me at all. My parents I never saw them touch a drop of alcohol or anything else. And same with my brother and sister. And I didn't run with crowds. I mean, in college, we drank probably a little too much sometimes. But it wasn't something that happened regularly. And there was no indication at all what lied ahead for me.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that was one of the things that I've wanted to ask you probably for a good year and a half as I continue to learn so much more and more. But do you think maybe a question to challenge you, because you played in the NFL, center, Buccaneers, 10 years, in that day and age where it wasn't only you better go on the field, you better go and practice. And this is how you were feeding your family. Your wife, if I recollect, met in college, kids you had long after starting. Right. So was there maybe that fears too, because you are admitting and saying, yeah, there was something still internally missing. This is what I needed, quote unquote.
Well, and, I played in an era where we used to beat the hell out of each other all week long.
You bet.
And hopefully there was enough left in the tank to play on Sunday. It was that mentality, that junction boy mentality. I like to call it junction boy because that was, Bear Bryant's.
Right.
When they took them all out to West Texas and just beat the hell out of them, for 6 or 7 weeks. And that's kind of the coaching philosophy back then. If you don't practice hard, you're not going to play hard. So a lot of the injuries that we sustained in my pro career happened during practice.
Sure.
And it always blew my mind that you would treat your greatest commodity like that, which were your players, and not have them ready on Sunday. It was more important how you practice. So, you didn't want to get that reputation also of always missing practice or always being in the training room or always, being worked, always in line to see the doctor. You know, you didn't want to get that reputation because that was a reputation you were never going to get away from and what was sure to be a short NFL career. So,
Right.
you know, I just suffered in silence, and I took handfuls of pain pills every day, and I avoided all that. And I got out there. I didn't want anybody else to get in my position either. So that was the motivation behind staying out there all the time.
Mhm.
And, you know, one thing led to another. And I looked at it more like a necessary evil, you know,
Right.
instead of what it really was. And that was a full-blown addiction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Flindt, you had a point where you were an EMT
Mhm.
and you were active in your addiction. Did you find that out of a situation that it almost continued to fuel you, give you that boost through that, especially the traumatic stuff that occurred?
Absolutely. No question. I mean, Randy, I'm sure you can attest to this, you know, because you made a statement about giving you that boost. You know, whenever I'd take 7 to 10 Vicodin every morning, you know, when I was waking up, and, you know, 20 minutes later, it does give you that boost. It kind of, okay, now let's go. I'm ready to roll here, you know, and then of course you're taking a bunch during the day, and, you know, and eventually, whether it's 5:30 in the evening or 8 o'clock in the evening, you know, then you start to kind of fade out and drool's coming out of your mouth, and, you know, you can't even make it to the bathroom, you know. But as an EMT, you know, working with paramedics and whatnot, yeah. But it's interesting because not only was I, you know, seeing all this stuff that normal people shouldn't see. Sure, was I taking it to mask that? Of course, but I was also taking it because I needed to. You know, the addiction was so bad. People don't understand. We are required almost to take that amount of pills during the day, because if we don't, we're going to start to get dope sick, and that's the last thing that we want to feel, man. That's the number one reason why we don't stop taking this stuff, is we don't want to get dope sick, you know. And of course, then you know, the tolerance keeps building. Hell, I tell people I took 70 or 80. I could have taken 120 that day if I had them. You know,
Right.
I mean, Jesus, if you
had them, yeah.
If you had them. Well, Randy, let me tell you this one thing. Yeah, I had them because I happened to be forging a few of those prescriptions along the way. Oh yeah, and let me tell you something. When the DEA shows up at your door, and your wife answers, and they say, "Is Flindt Andersen home?" And your wife standing there and says, "Go get him." you know, not quite a feeling you want to have. Let me tell you.
The DEA is a pretty good interventionist, aren't they?
Yeah, they
are. You also talk about the culture. So it's a locker room culture. So are we to understand the accessibility was just there? I mean, did you have to run through a team doctor, external? I'm talking about when you first started taking pain pills.
Yeah. No, I had team doctors that I was getting it from. I had the team trainers, and I had teammates I was getting it from. So, you know, it was kind of, it was kind of the culture of the NFL back then. I mean, we had an open drug safe in the middle of the training room that was full of narcotics, you know, full of benzos and full of opiates. And, you know, if it ever was accidentally locked, we had 3 white guys that started on defense, and their jersey numbers were the combination to the safe that whole decade that I was there. So, you know, there was plenty of accessibility and no accountability at all. And, you know, not once in that 10 years that all this was going on, not once did anybody ever say, you know, "Randy, why are you slurring your words?" Or, "Randy, why are you late to meetings or nodding off in meetings?" Or, "Why are you the last to leave the building every night and pills are missing out of the safe?" Nobody ever asked me that because I was always playing good. And, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
God, that brings back memories, man. I mean, that just you know, yeah, slurring your words and showing up late and you know, all of those things just you know, it brings back memories that, God, I just But I'm glad you brought it up because, I even need that reminder from time to time.
Sure.
I got 21 years of sobriety. Not that I'm any better than anybody else, but, we have a tendency in long-term sobriety sometimes to forget,
Right.
those little things, especially those little things you just mentioned. They're not little, but those are the things that upset our coaches, our friends, our families, and it's a good reminder for me. It really is.
Alcohol Treatment and Recovery Center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised, top quality care with programs for detox, inpatient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living, support groups, and more. With 50 plus years of combined experience and sobriety, Flindt, Andersen, and Thelma Gatlin Wilson provide adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect, and a safe, comfortable environment to begin the process of recovery. To proudly create and sustain a life without addiction, call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
So let me ask you then on top of that. So we're starting, no one's the accountability. And we've heard this so many times. We had Chris Farley's brother on, and that's immediately what popped in my head is that no one, being a celebrity that was still performing, no one made it accountable. How with you did that lead then to pro athletes in recovery and you wanting to start to speak up and bring this awareness? Because it's just as impactful in a different way, like the CTE issues.
Yeah, but there was a lot of years in between that, though,
Sure.
Between that open drug safe and me wanting to help people,
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I was in treatment in 2009 and it's crazy. I was sitting at a picnic table and it was exactly 2 weeks into the process of being in treatment. I was going off to treatment for 90 days, but 2 weeks into the process, I was sitting at a picnic table and I was sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't get a grip on myself. I just couldn't get myself under control. And it was all because for the first time in 20 plus years, I was having to deal with life on life's terms and thinking about all the huge wake of destruction that I left back in Houston, with my family, with my reputation, with my employment, with my finances, everything. And I was having to deal with that sober for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I couldn't get over the obsession to throw pills down every day,
Right.
And it was like at that very second that all that was going on, that I was sobbing uncontrollably and all that. It was like somebody came up behind me and draped a warm quilt around my shoulders. Mm. And I say quilt because I remember feeling weight and warmth on me at that very minute. And it was like all that was lifted off of me. I had this overwhelming confidence that not only could I do this, but I had to make it mean something. And that was kind of the birth of Pro Athletes in Recovery. Although I didn't know at the time what I was going to do with it, I just knew that there was a lot of other guys out there just like me who were struggling in silence, and for whatever reason, pride, ego, guilt, shame, whatever it was, they wouldn't put their hand up and ask for help. But usually it was because they didn't think any resources were available for them.
Right.
So, that was kind of what I wanted to do, but I had a lot of work to do on myself first.
But I wanted to ask that prior to talking about when your NFL career ended, to show people exactly what you said. There had to be a purpose. So NFL career comes to an end. Can you talk us through when you knew that was over?
Yeah, it was, like I said, I played in an era where we were a revolving door of players, coaches, front office people, pretty much everybody. And, the one consistent thing about the Buccaneers in the 80s and early 90s was Randy Grimes at center. I seemed to survive every change, coaching change or player change that they made. And I remember that last year, 92, was after the last game. Back then, you would come in, you would clean out your locker. If you weren't going to the playoffs, you'd come in, clean out your locker. You'd have an exit meeting with your coach. You'd watch the film from the day before, and you pretty much leave town until the next spring, till minicamp started. Now it's more of a year-round job. But back then, I came in after that last game, and I was cleaning out my locker, and I remember Coach Sam Weiss walking by me and putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, "Hey, Randy, we won't need you next year." And he never even slowed down to look at me in the eye when he said that. And the next thing I remember is turning to look and seeing him exit that locker room. And I can remember thinking, wow, that's how it ends. You know, all the blood, sweat, and tears that I've left on football fields all over this country since fourth grade.
Right.
And that's how it ends, with a coach who doesn't even have the courtesy to slow down and look me in the eye and tell me that I'm fired. And, you know, not that I expected to have a street named after me or a parade or anything like that, but, you know, I never thought it would end like that. And I remember just raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door. And that was the end of Randy Grimes, the football player. And, you know, that was just throwing gasoline on an already raging dumpster fire, which was my addiction.
You bet.
And I didn't do well for many years after that. I was struggling to find out who I was when I didn't have that uniform to put on anymore, that playbook to look at. You know, I lost my identity. I had allowed football to become who I was instead of just something that I was good at.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that is almost a situation that you used, you know, opioids, benzos, which, you know, you'll accredit that was the downfall. And I really want to touch more on that as I'm starting to learn more about the effects of benzos. But you played football. The substance was a part to continue that. And then it became, you were an addict that played football to get his addiction.
Yeah. I mean, it was my last 2 years of my career. I was taking so many benzos and opiates before games that I was playing games in complete blackouts. You know, I would be home at night, late at night after playing somewhere in the country, you know, an entire game at starting center. And, you know, I didn't remember any of it. You know, I'd be all beat up and fingernails all torn up and bruised and scratched up and dehydrated and everything that you are after an NFL football game. And I didn't remember any of it. And I played every down as starting center. You know, I was the quarterback of the offensive line. I was getting guys going in the right direction. I was changing blocking schemes. You know, I was making calls at the line of scrimmage. I was having to listen to the quarterback but I was doing it all in a blackout as a result of taking so much Halcyon. Matter of fact, was the name of that. And yeah, I mean, it just progressed to the point where I left the game with a serious addiction, and it was the tolerance just kept getting higher. I needed more and more pills all the time. The pain, the chronic pain, the injuries just kept getting worse, and you know, it was a never-ending thing there.
God, Randy, you're lucky to be alive. You know, I mean, you know, you obviously know that, and I know that. You know, you brought up Halcyon. Jesus, I haven't heard that drug in I can't tell you how many years.
I've never heard of it.
But part of my repertoire back then as well.
Halcyon was the devil.
Yeah, it was the devil, man. And I could imagine, especially those days in the NFL. Yeah, that just letting you do whatever you guys wanted to do in that locker room, you know, to get you through that game and to just to keep you going. But the benzo thing, I got to say that it doesn't surprise me, because as opiate addicts, we kind of fall into that benzo category at some point. But mine was a little different, because I went on a benzo run for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I can and I went through the withdrawals alone on the benzo. I did not go to treatment for that.
Any seizures? Do you have any seizures?
I had a seizure in 1999, a day before my son's graduation, actually, from high school. He found me in the garage having a seizure, but that was from opioids, because I didn't take, well, we don't know exactly, but I'd stopped taking them for a couple of days because I wanted to feel normal for my son's graduation. Yeah, there you go. He opens up the garage door. Then I'm flopping on the ground like a fish, and I got a bone sticking out of my left shoulder because I broke my shoulder when I hit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's the one and only seizure I've ever had. But when I went through that benzo withdrawal on my own, the only way I can describe that was take the worst nightmare you have ever had, ever, times it by 500,000, and you're having it during the daytime
Right.
as you're walking around.
All day long.
All day long, man. And it seemed like it went on for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was. I don't know how I made it through that one.
I used to, I can remember driving all over Houston looking for more benzos, knowing that I could have a seizure at any minute. And I did. I had plenty of seizures as a result of withdrawal. But that's how desperate I was.
Right.
Just by the grace of God, I didn't kill somebody else or myself, driving around looking for those just so I wouldn't have another seizure. Right. And like you said earlier, the last 5 or 6 years of my addiction was all about not getting drug sick.
That's it.
It wasn't like the pills were even working anymore. It was about not getting sick.
That's exactly it.
Or not having a seizure,
Right.
Something that both is a testimony to the gifts that you have in your life and had, even though it was hard to see in your addiction, was your wife standing by you through all of this.
Yeah, and she'll be the first to tell you that she wanted to leave me, but God wouldn't let her. God kept promising her that he was going to heal our family, and she clung to that. And, it was her in the end who I lost another house as a result of my addiction, and she had to move in with her parents. Yeah. And because of pride and ego and everything else, I didn't go with her. But I stayed in that empty house that we had because the new owners weren't going to take possession of it for like another 90 days. And I can remember sleeping on the floor of that house with no utilities. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. And I can remember thinking, wow, I was an All-American in college. I was a second-round draft pick of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was All-Pro. I was a 1988 NFL Man of the Year for the Bucs, and here I am sleeping in the floor of a vacant house with no utilities, no car, no job, no money, and that was kind of the perfect storm that was coming together in the spring and summer of 2009. But yeah, she's the hero of my story for sure.
Wow. I'll tell you what, my friend, that story is almost mirrored to mine. I've been married to the same woman for 43 years. And like, because she gets asked all the time, why the hell did you stay with Flindt? And first of all, we met when we were 16, and we're friends and all that sort of thing. But she said that she always knew there was something good in me. And I know God played a huge role, in her decision making as well. But that's not to say that she didn't kick my ass out on 3 different occasions.
Oh yeah,
because my brother, I know exactly what it is. I've lost the cars, I've lost the houses, I've lost all of it, at one time or another, during this addiction. And again, today a lot of people say, well, especially young people in recovery, well, God, how'd you get it back? And And I said, it comes, but it takes time.
Yeah, one day at a time.
One day at a time, and it will get there. And I tell people I'm not in a rush, because guess what? I've already been to hell. All right, it's okay. Everything from that point on March 5th, 2001 is an increase in my life to today. Yeah. That's all we can hope for, is that sometimes 15 minutes at a time, Randy.
Yeah. And, after treatment, after that 90 days that I spent in treatment, I thought I was going to ride into Houston on a white horse and I was going to be the savior. Hey, look at me. I went off and got well. Look at me, blah, blah, blah. And, I went off to this luxury treatment center and they stayed in Houston still struggling,
Yes.
And so they didn't get the same help that I did. And it took a long time. It took a lot of, me staying sober, them trusting me again. I mean, it takes time to build that trust back up. And it wasn't an easy process for sure.
Right. How old were the kids when you went off to treatment?
24 and 19.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a daughter that just got out of college and a son that was just starting college.
So they pretty much knew dad and his addiction the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I always say I had two great kids that worshiped the ground I walked on until they couldn't stand me anymore,
Yeah.
Until they, they would bring their friends in and avoid me. They'd walk around the room that I was in because I was either passed out or slurring my words or something. And that's what it came to. Matter of fact, my daughter had her first child and she wouldn't let me come around him because I wasn't fit to be around him. And that was one of the things that finally got me to raise my hand and ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boy, all this is awfully familiar. Mine were 19 and 13 at the time when I went in, and the oldest one didn't even want to go down for family week or anything. He just wanted nothing to do with me. My younger one went simply because I think he was riding on an airplane. That was it. But man, awfully close to home right here.
What's maybe some advice to someone that is going through treatment, looking to reconcile with the family, rebuild that trust from your own experience?
Well, you've got to learn patience. That's for sure. You're not going to ride in there on a white horse and be this great savior, because there was a lot of damage done. So it's all patience and accountability. They want to see you doing the next right thing for a long period of time, going to meetings, calling your sponsor, working on your relationship at home, working on that marriage, working on your relationship with your children, because, for so many years I was present, but I wasn't present, So that's got to change too. And it's just a recommitment to your family and everything else that surrounds that. And it's all about accountability. You've got to be accountable to somebody. And whether it's your wife, your children, or both, Yeah,
I remember the day I got back, I had a couple of cars repossessed while I was in treatment. Nice. That's always fun. And my wife picked me up in a borrowed Jeep Wrangler with no top on it, on I think April 5th, whatever it was. And as I'm getting off the plane, of course, the treatment center I went to, they had a temporary sponsor for me. And Randy, I imagine you're what, 6'4", 5'6", something like that?
6'4", yeah.
6'4". Okay, well, that's what this temporary sponsor was, and he meets me there, and I walk up to him, and I'm like 150 pounds, soaking wet. I didn't put on that much weight when I was there, and I walk up to the guy and I go, "All right, man." I go, "What do you want me to do?" And he goes, "First thing, I want you in 190 meetings in 190 days." And I look at this guy and I go, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And he goes, "No, I'm not fucking kidding you." He says, "You don't do it, I'm out." I said, "I'm all in, man." I said, "I'm all in." But here's what my wife said. My wife said, "I don't give a shit about your meetings, although you're going." Okay. She said, "Because you got a family to support. So you get to do both. You're going to get your ass back to." She was so mad, and rightfully so. Sure. Rightfully so. I mean, I had to go back, had to earn a living, had to support my family. I had to, and it took forever. It seemed like it took forever, but patience on both sides, I think, is key here. Sure.
Yeah, it definitely takes two. And if you, in my book, I published the letters that my children wrote me while I was in treatment. And it kind of reflects their state of mind at the time. My daughter will say, "Hey, Dad, I'm a different person now. I understand more about the disease." But, back then they didn't. And that's where a lot of people are. And, that's why we wrote the book and put so many characters in it. We wanted that person who was mad in it. We wanted that codependent in it. We wanted that person who didn't believe it was a disease, that it was a moral failing. We had that person in it. We had the person who truck got borrowed and wrecked, the friend. So we wanted all these different characters in that, because those are the people that we've encountered over the last, 13 years of doing interventions and everything else. And, who would have ever thought that I would be in somebody's living room with my wife doing an intervention,
Right.
And that's just the craziness, how God plans everything out, that his plan.
That's it.
Right. It's what do you want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans.
Right.
Exactly.
Speaking of, your upbringing, the church was something that was present for you, present for your wife, and I'm assuming
Right.
probably in the raising of your own children. But how did your spirituality change your relationship with the, as I like to say, the God I do business for, let alone how did that maybe strengthen your marriage and bond with your children?
Well, I married a preacher's daughter. That's, somebody that I met first day of school at Baylor University, and we got married after our junior year, and everybody in her family was a preacher practically. And so that, that helped. But, I was always a Christian. I was raised in church.
Yeah.
Religion wasn't, our football wasn't religion, but it was a close second,
Sure.
And, my mom dragged us to church every Sunday and every Wednesday night, and we were always there. So I was raised in church, and I was even saved. I was a Christian. That's one of the reasons I went to Baylor and to the Baptist University there. And, we had such a great team. It wound up being a great decision also, but I was the one who felt that I'd let God down. I was the one who had all the shame and the guilt and everything else. And although I was always a Christian, I always had that shame and guilt that I let God down. And it was as much that as it was that I let my wife down, or my parents down, or my children down, or my employers down,
God, I remember singing. I went to a church called Valley Christian Center, and I was saved. I grew up in church. My mom dragged us every Sunday as well. But I remember singing on the praise team at a local church, and I'm using in between services in the parking lot. It got to the point where my hypocrisy was so overwhelming to me, that I literally had to walk away from the church and walk away from the vocal part of that was so important to me. I just had to walk away. And like you, Randy, it was I was letting God down, but then there was always that, I'd be pissed at him. Right. Why me? Why did you put me through those surgeries? Why did I have to be hooked on these opiates? I'd look around as I'm driving. That person isn't hooked on it, and that person isn't hooked on it. Why is it me? And I'll tell you what, it took a long time for me and the good Lord upstairs for me to surrender,
heal.
Right. And to heal and all that sort of stuff. You bet.
Well, and you call it hypocrisy, but really we're in survival mode.
Yeah.
You talk about using during church and all that. Well, we don't think about that. We just think about not being sick, right, and being normal. We think we're being normal when really we're slurring our words and everything else. So it's survival, and yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
No, I thank you both for sharing your perspective, because it made me, and I think I've told you, Flindt, my struggle wasn't so much that I, especially when surrendering and working the 12 steps, that wasn't that I didn't believe there was a higher power, because I did. I just didn't think he loved me. So until you put it in those words like that, I hadn't really talked to anyone else. It was like angry, like, well, I'm clearly not lovable. I know I'm here. I know you're out there, but I'm definitely not here to be of any service to you whatsoever. I must be one of those lost people, and you can take it literally, metaphorically, or whatever. I guess I'm just determined for hell. So I might as well keep living this life, right? Enjoy the excess, the next buzz, the next rush, the next waking up and a stranger's bed, whatever bullshit, empty stuff that it was, that was like, oh, isn't life fun?
Right. Well, and that's the good thing about this program is that, you hear it all the time. Love. So the program will love you till you learn to love yourself again. And that's so true. So true. Because we've beat ourselves up for so many years,
Yep. Yeah. I want to ask you, because Flindt does a lot of speaking and working with families, and how do you approach families that not only when you go and do your public speaking, but maybe that come to you for the advice to maybe understand kids wanting to understand a parent, or vice versa, a parent wanting to understand their child addict? And
well, there's so much stigma associated with this disease. Our message is that it's okay to not be okay. But you got to raise your hand and ask for help. And there's plenty of help and hope out there, but you got to raise your hand. And, we're constantly trying to tear down that stigma that keeps families, that keeps people that are struggling from raising their hand and asking for help. I know with former professional athletes from all sports, that's always there, but it's everybody. It's not just athletes, Right. A lot of families have a lot of guilt and shame when their loved one, struggles with this disease. And because of that, a lot of people die, because they don't want to, or they say, not my child, or if they don't acknowledge the disease, then it's not really there, that kind of stuff. So, we love working with families. We love educating them because we know that we're not gonna legislate our way out of this. Right. We're not gonna arrest our way out of it. But I think we can eventually educate our way out of it, and teach families about codependency and enabling and the disease of addiction. And that's our goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love what you just said, because we say the same thing here. We're not going to legislate our way out of this. We're just not. This is going to be through education. It's going to be through awareness. It's going to be through just standing up and telling the truth. And I have vowed to stand up, and this, Jason, vowed to stand up and tell the truth, no matter where I'm at, who I'm talking to. Okay, because I don't care if I piss somebody off anymore. I really don't. We are losing way too many kids. We're losing way too many young adults. And hell, now we're losing way too many older adults in this as well. Hell, out here, the second leading group for opiate dependency is the 60-year-old and up.
Really?
Yeah, because it's not that they're drug addicts or have drug addict behavior, but they're dependent on the drug and they can't get off of the damn drug. Because now, even if you're in Medicare stage, like I am, Medicare doesn't cover treatment for that. This whole thing, and that's a whole nother podcast in itself.
You're right.
Right. But I wanted to get your opinion on this, Randy, because my wife puts it this way. She does believe that this is a disease, and I do believe it is a disease as well. But here's what she says. She says, if you have been given all the tools during your recovery, all the tools, let's take the disease portion out of it for a second. If you relapse, she says, that's your choice. What do you think?
Well, I think it's stinking thinking. First of all, I don't think we ever get past that. And, even 13 years later, there's days where I thought, you know what? Yeah. I could probably take as directed. Mm-hmm. But one thing I did learn to do while I was in treatment was play the tape all the way through. And I know how it ends every time. It ends with me in an emergency room or a wrecked car or in a hotel because I've been kicked out here. Every time, it always ends that way. So, that one is too many and 1,000 is never enough. That's for people like me. And I can't take as directed. I can't follow doctor's orders, and so I stay away from it.
I think that's the component of that gets talked about in the 12 steps. And I had an incident recently. It's that restored to sanity, where we are sane enough that we are not dominated by our addiction to go, "Ooh, I can think that, like you said, think this out and play it out. Like I had an incident where I was served a drink and went, "Oh my God, that's alcohol." And that little devil was like, you can get away with this one. Yeah. You're around people that don't know, right. And you can, sober up before you get home, and the girlfriend and kids will never know. And everybody that does know is already buzzed here anyways. And, there's like, no, because guess what? Tomorrow I'll be like, oh, I got to go back to work for a few hours, and then I'll grab that secret 6-pack that'll turn into the 30-pack that right. It's hey, guess what, Flindt? I'm not feeling too good this whole week, and probably next week I'll be in when I feel better. Right. It's like bullshit, man. That's exactly where it's going to go.
That's it.
And I've met plenty of people that have gone through treatment, one and done, so yeah. I don't think that relapse is part of recovery. I think it happens a lot, happens more than it should. But I wouldn't say, I hear that all the time, is that relapse is part of recovery. Yeah. And I just don't believe that, because I've met enough people that have done one and done, right. and been successful, still successful. And, I think it's about aftercare. I think it's about getting out of treatment, creating a safe environment, getting into meetings, getting with a sponsor, and staying accountable to somebody every day. And I'll always say that, that it's all about accountability.
Yeah. I hear that relapse is part of recovery. I've even heard therapists say it, and it's like, first of all, why are you even saying that?
Doesn't have to,
it doesn't have to be. All right. It simply doesn't have to be. Don't allow somebody to use that as an excuse even.
Yeah. Don't even put it out in the universe,
Right. Don't even put it out there, man.
Yeah. And it's another great thing that you just touched on, Randy, was the way we started with your story. It was your environment. It was normal, everybody popping the pills and everything else. And now you created a totally different environment whatsoever. And that is such a key component, especially for a guy like me that likes people, but I need to be around people that it's safe to be, that there's that trust there.
When I came into treatment, when I pulled up to the treatment center, somebody opened the door from the outside, and I was leaning against that door, and I was so sick. I'd been puking and everything else in the back of that car. And they picked me up at the airport and drove me to the treatment center. And I was leaning against the door, and I just fell out of that car onto the concrete. And I had about another 30 feet to get inside the treatment center where they were going to admit me. And I crawled on all fours all the way through that door. And I remember, I don't remember much from that night, but I remember hearing that, Randy, in order to get this, you've got to have the desperation of a drowning man. And, I didn't know at the time what that meant. But, as an 8-year-old kid in Tyler, Texas, I did nearly drown. And I know how desperate I was under that water, how I clawed at the water, how I was screaming underwater, how I fought with every fiber in my body to get back to the surface. I know that desperation. And also, I'm a pretty tough guy, I thought. I've been in a lot of battles in the NFL. You don't get to stay in the NFL for 10 years as a starting center unless you're winning most of those battles. But crawling in that door that night was the toughest thing that I ever did. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was also the most rewarding thing I ever did.
Wow.
You bet.
I'm just fathoming, I think I told the story of freshman being a tall guy. Coach tried to make me a quarterback, so he was loading me up with cheeseburgers and shakes and everything else, like, hey, we're going to just pack you full of like 6,000, 7,000 calories a day. And I lost like 8 pounds at the end of the week, and just taking a couple of hits, like I folded like a towel in the cupboard. And so I can't imagine the 10 years of you playing and remember and watching that era and people coming on the blood and remembering that on the tape. And you saying that was the toughest thing that you went through. Yeah. I mean, that is the courage that it will take. But I think when you find that to go through your addiction, man, you start to see yourself completely different, which is vital.
You bet.
But I think it was about, and we touched on this earlier. I think the hardest part of it was surrender.
Yeah.
You know, it was giving up that power and knowing that I couldn't do this by myself, and that was a lot of it. You know, and I swear I listened to everything they told me in treatment. You know, I did the 90 days. I had a couple surgeries while I was in treatment. I had a knee replaced while I was in treatment, and did all that without opioids. I went to sober living after treatment. Here I was 49 years old in a family back in Houston, and I went to sober living for the next 6 months in Florida. So I was willing to do that. That surrender, that desperation stayed with me all throughout that aftercare. And even today, you know, I feel like I still have that brokenness and that surrender that it takes to stay sober every day. And, you know, if I'm struggling, I'll put my hand up. I don't, you know, it's not a problem nowadays like it was at one time.
Right. Well, you know, look, getting clean and getting older is not for wimps. Okay.
Got that right.
Because right now it hurts to get out of a chair half the time. You know, I mean, I'm here to tell you, man, there's not for wimps. That's for sure.
Well, and I still have all those injuries and aches and pains, you know, and I'll probably kill my kidneys and liver with all the Advil and Tylenol that I take.
Right.
But you know what? I know the alternative, and it's not good. Yeah. So, you know, I want to leave a legacy of sobriety for my children and for everybody else in my path, you know.
Let's wrap up with pro athletes in recovery. Maybe what kind of work do you do with what types of organizations, in case people are really interested in that? Because you do speak to some high school youth sports teams as well.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I work with everybody. The reason that Pro Athletes in Recovery was started was back when I came into treatment, there was nothing out there for former NFL players. There was no resources out there. And so what I did was I helped the NFL start a organization called the Player Care Foundation. And we started going out and telling my story and reaching out to the 17,000 other guys that were out there, retired players. And man, they started coming out of the woodwork, you know, putting their hand up and asking for help. And little did I know that it would be so successful that Major League Baseball would get involved, and the NHL and the NBA, and pretty much every sport that has an organization that supports their former players, whether it's MMA or the Jockeys Guild or the PGA. You know, they all have organizations that support their former athletes. And those are the guys that I work with. I try to stay away from current players because every team has their own protocols. But, you know, I work with all the alumni associations, all the player associations with the different the different sports. And but I don't just work with athletes. You know, I work with military. I love to get veterans and athletes together because and first responders. You know, because they call each other out. You know, they speak the same language, and you know, I love to see that in group. It's a beautiful thing to watch. But you know, I work with everybody. We work with families. My wife likes to work with families, and you know, NFL and the Pro Athletes in Recovery. That was just God's way of keeping me connected to the game that I love so much. You know.
All right. Because there's someone I'm pushing to write a book. Why the decision to write a book, and what's the most rewarding response that you've gotten from it thus far?
Yeah, well, the reason we wrote it was a healing process for the Grimes family. Mm-hmm. You know, my wife had a part of it. She had a platform in it. My children had a platform in it. My brother, my sister, my mom, you know, had some friends that had a platform in it. And it was just a healing process. You know, I didn't really care if it sold a a copy or not. It was good for our family to go through that process. But since then, it's been so successful. Everybody loves it. The reviews have been great. We sold a lot of books over since we released it February the 8th out at the Super Bowls when we released it. And here it is, and it's just been a great thing for our family to go through, and it's already accomplished what I wanted it to.
Fantastic.
That's cool.
Absolutely.
That's cool. Of course, people can get it through your website and also on Amazon, right?
Yeah, you can go to offcenterthebook.com, but that'll take you straight to the Amazon link. Or you can just go to Amazon and look up Randy Grimes Off Center. And or you can go to my website, proathletesinrecovery.org. You can, if you can't find me on social media, you're not trying very hard. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I'm everywhere because when you self-publish, you got to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you have trouble going to the Parents and Addicts in Need pages, look at who we're following. Randy's on all of them. Okay. You'll find them there. Flindt, any last things for Mr. Grimes?
Oh, Randy, thank you so much. It's absolute pleasure and joy talking with you. I'm so proud of you, for getting clean, staying that way, man. And keeping your family intact. I mean, that is just great stuff. That's why we do what we do right there, man. It's not about us. It's about them. And, and we were put on this earth to do something, sometimes there's a couple of us that are a little hard-headed and we got to go through what we got to go through, but we're here for a reason. And I know, my friend, you are. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.